Ladies and gentlemen, please do welcome our chair, Sir Michael Barber, and our CEO, Gordon Hollins. Sir Michael, please can we start with you? First of all, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, well, thank you, Spencer, and thank you to all the staff at Somerset County Cricket Club for organising this, and most of all, thank you to all of you for joining. We want this to be part of a growing and continuous dialogue between ourselves and the membership, because our membership are the most precious resource we have, and if we can all understand the challenges we face and move forward together, that will give us enormous strength as we go into the future. So with the way we're going to organise it, I'm going to talk about the context of the high performance review, the context for English cricket, and how that affects Somerset. And then Gordon's going to pick that up and talk about the nitty gritty of the Strauss review, as well as build on what I've said. So I just want to begin by saying that it's been a huge privilege to be part of Somerset County Cricket Club now through a whole season, with all its ups and downs. I'm glad and relieved that we beat Northamptonshire and stayed in the first division. I agonised with every ball and every wicket, even when I wasn't often. I wasn't at the county ground, but I was following it on one form of social media or another. But anyway, I've actually spent more time on meetings. We built a new board, as you know. We are, which is really strong. Spent time at the ECB trying to understand what's going on there and being in dialogue with them. That's important. And I've spent time with various stakeholders around the system, all of which are important to us. And I've also spent time reading and learning about cricket. I'm on a very steep learning curve, and I've been learning about Somerset cricket, English cricket around the world. And I know I've still got a lot to learn, but I wanted to share where I've got to and share my anxieties with you in a kind of open, plain speaking, rather uncertain kind of way, because that's how I feel. And I understand my job is to help bring Somerset County Cricket Club through this. But the context that we're dealing with at the ECB and the Strauss Review and all that is complicated and demanding and challenging. And then I'm happy to discuss anything you want to raise when it comes to that part of it. And as I said, our collective wisdom is what will take us through these challenging years ahead. There are three big themes out of all the stuff that I've learned that I want to share with you, test out with you. One is what's happening to global power in cricket. For 100 years or so, the MCC and the Melbourne Cricket Club in Australia basically ran cricket. And then the MCC morphed into the ECB in England, and other changes were happening elsewhere in the world. But also the ICC was developed, and instead of Lords and the MCC running world cricket, there was an ICC. And the shift that's taking place very rapidly before our very eyes is that the power that used to rest with England and Australia now rests with India. I'll just give you one fact. 85% of all the funding in global cricket is in India, and it's mostly money from media rights. The IPL, an rarely known statistic, is bigger in media rights terms than the Premier League. So that gives you some. So again, I'm not approving these things. I'm stating some facts. So global power is shifting. The second thing is media and money. I've just mentioned one statistic. A single T20 in India attracts 7 times as much as a single test match from the media, because of the size of the audience and the advertising opportunities it provides for the media moguls. That's quite terrifying, but it's true. And then thirdly, related to the other two, is player opportunity, which is globalizing. For the best players in the world, whether they're English or any other country, there are increasing numbers of franchise tournaments in which they can participate. There were 11 this season. Next year, there'll be 14. There'll be one in the US, which will attract a large amount of money and top players. There'll be one in South Africa that's replacing what would have been a test series between South Africa and Australia in the cricket's timetable in South Africa. Our players play in those competitions. They will have more opportunity. Our best players certainly will have more opportunity. George Thomas is playing in Pakistan right now and doing rather well. Will Smeed we know about. I could go on. So these three things: global power, is shifting, media money is driving the future of the game, and player opportunity is opening up, certainly for the most talented players. But when you strip that down, there are three big shifts happening before our eyes. One is that England and Australia are relatively weaker compared to Asia, which is growing, and India is fostering relations with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, who won the Asia Cup recently, and so on. So that's one shift in power. The second is the shift from red ball to white ball, driven by TV money and player opportunity, and to some extent the youth, the younger generations. And then thirdly, whereas 30 years ago, you had quite a lot of local power in the counties, and then that became national with the introduction of central power. Now national influence is shifting globally. And in the global game now, England, which used to pretty much rule the roost, is now one in a clamour of different countries and demands, with India by far the most influential. The smaller countries who want to get their share of the mainly Indian broadcasting rights, but also other broadcasting rights, are very keen on having some kind of World Cup every year. And you'll see that happening. That affects the timetable for cricket in every country, including our own. I'm not advocating these things, but these are things I've learned and begun to understand. They provide the context in which I think about what we're trying to do at Somerset. Meanwhile, there's in the global economy, and certainly in the British economy, two big factors affecting sports clubs in general. One is inflation. It's affecting all families, of course, as well, but it's affecting sports clubs dramatically. And the second is the rise in interest rates. So sports clubs, top professional sports clubs, are becoming vulnerable to those challenges, cricket clubs included, although not for us at the moment, because we've been very well managed thanks to Gordon and his predecessors, and we've got minimal debt. But others most definitely are under pressure, and we're seeing cherished institutions go under. Just in the last 2 weeks in professional rugby, Worcester Warriors have gone under. Wasps are going under this week. They're 2 times European champions, but they've still gone down because of debt and interest rates rising, and in Worcester's case, because of borrowing to get through COVID and being stuck. The Brighton Football Club chairman said recently that while he loved having the fans in the ground, they didn't cover the costs of what he needed to do to put on a match. These are clubs that are feeling the pressure. So the first role of the board, the new board, and the first responsibility I feel as chair of the board is one of stewardship, looking after the club. We're custodians of Somerset County Cricket Club through this phase, and we need to be able to hand it on to a future in better shape than we found it. And that's a big challenge in this context. But that's our main task. So we're custodians, we're exercising stewardship. I was talking to a very long-standing member who is been a member for decades, since he was a boy, loves Somerset County Cricket Club, lots of comments on the season and everything. But his big conclusion was, I want Somerset to be as inspiring for my grandson as it has been for me. That's what stewardship means. So I come to some specifics now. We have to, in order to do that, we have to ensure Somerset remains at the top table of English cricket. We've said that before in the previous meeting, and we repeat it again and again among ourselves. That means recruiting, retaining, and inspiring top players. It means winning matches. It means winning competitions sometimes. It means bringing talent through to the England team. We want to generate wonderful memories and inspire people in Somerset, across the Southwest, those who come to the ground, those beyond the ground who follow our cricket. Now, we do that because we have a purpose beyond cricket, and it's important to remember that. Richard Thompson, the new chair of the ECB, talks about cricket being the most socially inclusive sport, or hopes it will become the most socially inclusive sport, both in who follows it, who watches it, who joins clubs, and now and in the future, who plays it and who plays at elite level, boys and girls, all social backgrounds. And for us, that's across the Southwest. That's an important mission. We have to inspire people across the region and across the generations. So let's just follow that argument through. So if that's our moral purpose, then we have to inspire through the quality of the cricket we put on. If we're going to do that, we have to be at the top table. We have to be in competition for the big prizes and sometimes hopefully winning them. That in turn requires us to be able to recruit, retain, and motivate top players as player wage inflation goes through the roof, given the competition from these 14 franchises and other counties in this country that have test match grounds, or 100 franchises and have more money, therefore, than we do. So that in turn means we've got to provide a brilliant all-round experience for our players, and obviously at the same time provide a brilliant all-round experience for our members, our future members, and our paying spectators. And we know in the county ground we didn't always get that right this year, although we did make progress during the season. And I'm going through the argument. So that requires us in turn to have a strong relationship with the ECB. And by a strong relationship, I mean one in which we can be absolutely clear and blunt and direct where we disagree. And Gordon and I have been doing that repeatedly over the last month or so in relation to the Strauss Review, what we think matters to us in our stewardship function. At the same time, though, if we're going to have a strong relationship with ECB, we want to be admired for what we contribute to English cricket, and we want to be admired for how we conduct ourselves on and off the field. That's how we become strategically influential. In other words, we punch above our weight at national level. And all of that means, and this is my last point, means we have to manage the club well. We have to generate more funds than we've ever raised before, because that's going to be necessary to recruit the players we want. We have to do that during difficult times, inflation, interest rates rising, all of that. The money is not our purpose. The money is what enables us to deliver our moral purpose, to deliver cricket that inspires and that brilliant experience across the Southwest. That's what we're here for. And when we think about the high performance review, Gordon and I and the board, that's what we're thinking about. How do we come through that high performance review with a diet of cricket that is inspiring to the players and inspiring to our current audiences and our future audiences, because we don't want this kind of chopping and changing of the schedule year after year after year. And at that point, I'll hand over to Gordon, if I may, Spencer.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. And good evening to everyone. And thanks for joining us. I'd certainly echo everything that Michael has just said. And I think that what I would say is, talking specifically about the high performance review, which, as I think we'll probably communicate on this call, this isn't straightforward. And what cricket has a tendency to do is to look at issue by issue in a linear way and then move from one to the other. And actually, if you do that, you usually end up with the wrong answer. And what I mean by that is that if someone asks me now, how many blast matches should we play? If that's the only question that you ask me, I'll say at least 10 at home. And then someone did ask me that on an all-county call the other day, and they said, "Don't be silly, it can't be 10." I said, "Well, if that's the only question you ask me, I'm going to give you an answer to that specific question. But if you give me, if you want to discuss the championship, the one-day competition, the financial model for the game, international cricket, the 100, etc., then I might give you an entirely different answer." So the point here is that we believe passionately, and when I say we, I mean Michael, myself, and the board have discussed this at length, is that we believe passionately that we shouldn't make populist statements about one particular element of the review, which very often the bit that's exercising people is championship cricket, and that's understandable. And we believe passionately that we are a champion. We're an all-format club, but championship's at the heart of our DNA. We believe that. But it's very dangerous to deal with that subject in isolation of everything else. And I'll explain why. When we issued a board statement, I think we were the first club to make a statement on the high performance review. And Spencer might remind me when that was. I keep forgetting that date, but it was about a month or 5 weeks ago, when we met as a board and we issued a statement and we communicated to ECB, first, this is what we're going to be saying. We raised a number of things. And on the back of that, other counties followed. And that's getting to Michael's point about us leading and influencing. And ultimately, we've got 1/18 of influence. But actually, if we get things right, we can punch way above that 1/18 by dealing with things in the right way. And having made that statement, we've been consistent with that statement. And I'll just take you through the key points of it. If you haven't seen it, then please do look at the website, because it's on it's on the website. And we said in that statement that We believe that reform of the game is necessary. So we're not sitting in the Southwest saying everything's got to be the same, because in our opinion, that's just not a sustainable position. As rugby has found out this week, we've been through the most traumatic financial period in the club's history. Maybe look at the Second War, First War would have been pretty horrendous too, I'm sure. But the COVID situation was a horrendous time for our club and for all sports clubs. And in many ways, that's playing out in the rugby arena right now. And therefore, we believe reform is necessary. To sleepwalk on as if nothing's happened, with COVID having disrupted all sport and with the economic position that the world and the country is in now, it would be, in our view, foolhardy just to keep going as if nothing's changed, because a lot has changed. And therefore, we do advocate reform. The other thing we said in that review, in that report, was that, or that statement, was a lot of the analysis of the review, for those that have read it, is quite good, right? You've got 15 recommendations that mainly impact on England cricket, England teams, but also some really constructive recommendations around things like investing in coaching and in cricket management functions. So if anybody that's watched one of these football documentaries on Prime or Netflix or whatever will look at that and say, wow, the time and energy that football invest into the standard of coaching and the standards that they deliver puts, frankly, cricket to shame. We're nowhere near that. And we welcome those recommendations about such as investing in directors of cricket, coaches, and helping their development. So a lot of it's good. There are two that relate to the domestic playing programme, which are obviously fundamental and of passionate interest to all of us on this call. So what do we need? We also said that we need to be really clear what standards the game and ECB are saying that a good county needs to deliver to for the review and the objective of England being number one across all formats. What does a good county look like? What is it we need to deliver to achieve that? We've asked for that information. We think that's key, and I'll come back to that in a second. Michael mentioned the diet of cricket across the summer, and we all know that this season and next season is suboptimal. I think that's to put it mildly. It is far from satisfactory, but we felt that pressing pause and influencing the game to say, look, just halt here. Don't rush into rash changes before we have a chance to consider in detail the consequences of those changes, and critically engage with the cricket public in the way that we are doing now about what that means and the reasons and the rationale behind it. And I think that that's happened before, where there's been a review, lots and lots of time spent on that, and then suddenly you get 3 weeks to make up your mind. And we said, look, pause. And we believe we were listened to in that, which resulted in a commitment for 2023 to stay the same, and discussions and further work to continue. But the diet of cricket is key, because if you're a kid in Truro, in August of this year, the only top quality men's domestic cricket that you could access within a reasonable distance was Taunton in August, where we had 4 one-day matches in 43 days. And for the last 2 of those matches, we had 17 players missing. Now, what we said in this discussion is, look, that is just unacceptable. We know it's not easy to resolve it, but it needs resolved. And we were very, very clear about that. And that is part of the conversation. Because as Michael said in his introduction, a absolutely key function is to inspire the public of the Southwest, not just Somerset, but the 3.6 million people across our region, to inspire them to participate in our game whether it be playing the game, whether you're a boy or a girl or an adult, or you're someone with disabilities or whatever, playing the game, umpiring, coaching, helping out with your local club's groundwork, volunteering behind the bar, whatever it is, our reason for being, in our opinion, is to inspire people to participate in the game, because then the game itself grows, and ultimately Somerset become beneficiaries of having a bigger game with more people participating in it. And Michael's point about about it being an inclusive game is absolutely right, because if you're an inclusive and welcoming game for everybody, regardless of where you're from, that just makes good business sense, right? You've just got more people to offer some return on their interest in cricket. So the spread of cricket over the summer and the pattern is as critical, if not actually more critical, than how many games you play of what format, in our opinion, because it has to tick a lot of boxes. We asked too about the funding model, and the reality is that if we had just gone along with the Strauss report, it would have cost the club an awful lot of money. And also, we believe strongly that if, as a club, we are to compete at the top table, as Michael alluded to, along with those venues who compete at the top table, and I use that word wisely, if we are to stop all the power and all the funding and influence going to the venues rather than the clubs that stage major match cricket, then we have to have a funding model that rewards Somerset for the contribution that we make to the game as a club. And I've talked about this a lot, and I'm sorry if people are bored with me saying it, but if we don't get rewarded financially so that we can reinvest that finance, not to make money, but to reinvest it in cricket facilities, our squad, our pathway or whatever, unless we get rewarded for that, then before too long, everything's going to be going on in 7 test match venues. And we are making it very, very clear that's unacceptable and a really bad thing for cricket in this country. So the financial model is key, not to make money, but to allow Somerset and clubs like us to compete on the field so that we inspire people in the Southwest, become inclusive and so on. So it's an enabler more than anything else. That's key. We also made it clear in our statement that engagement and time to engage with the cricketing public, not just our members, I would say too, and I'm happy to talk about that. We've had some communication to say, what will you go to a binding members vote? Well, we don't think that's the right thing to do. We think that the consequences of this review go way beyond boundary walls. They go way beyond the walls of the ground and way beyond membership. And we need to, as a responsibility to inspire people across the region, we need to listen to kids, we need to listen to supporters who pay for a ticket but aren't members, because this is a cricket discussion as much as it is a club discussion. So that's key. And I think I had a really interesting conversation today with a chap called Alan Hyam, who has been leading the Lancashire Action Group that some of you will have seen. And Alan came down helpfully today for a chat with Annie Chav, myself, and Chris Swayam, who is from one of our members from Devon. And we had a really good conversation about the need for whatever comes out of this review to help cricket rather than just deal with one thing in isolation, and talked about the real need for the club's board to be able to go into battle to address all of the issues that I've raised and have a conversation about what the solutions are to allow us as a club to deliver our purpose, rather than just say, we'll fix the number of championship games and that be it, because it's much, much bigger than that in our opinion. We also talked quite a lot about the challenges of modern day cricket clubs within an increasingly sophisticated world. And the thing we talked about was if you look at the history of county cricket clubs, you go back 30 years, it was relatively unsophisticated because you didn't have health and safety legislation, equality, diversity and inclusivity requirements, event match day security, customer standards, and the legal liabilities, HR regulation, which is now very different. You've now got small businesses who, in our view, need to have cricket at the heart, but business on the mind. They're very different beasts to those that existed 30 years ago when we all switched on BBC Two at 2:00 on a Sunday to watch the John Player League and watch games when supermarkets were closed, shops weren't open because you couldn't do that on Sundays. The world we're in now is very, very different. And we're in a much more globalized world, both generically and from a cricket perspective. We're in a globalized world, as Michael alluded to with the India remarks, and a very much more commercialized world. We're now a £9 million business, and there is a lot of responsibility that goes with making sure that we operate professionally. And the conversation that we had today was around about how you ensure that members' clubs can operate effectively in that environment. And we talked a bit about German football. All the German football clubs are members' clubs. And yet you've got them competing pretty well at the top of European football. And they're managing to get that balance. And I think we've got a lot to learn about how we retain our heartbeat of our club. And it is the heartbeat of the club, and respect the past and the traditions the club has evolved. And at the same time, make sure that we're fit and organised to deal with the challenges of the modern world and ensure that Somerset remains at the top table and is a strong cricket club for the county and for the Southwest for many, many decades to come. So on that note, I'll pause, mainly because I need a slug of my tea, but also, Spencer, it's probably time just to allow the opportunity for questions, I suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who are interested in and may not have seen the club's response to the high performance review, I've posted that in the chat facility. Obviously, we've had a lot of pre-meeting questions already sent in. I think that Gordon and Sir Michael's introduction, if you like, will have covered off a lot of those questions already. If somebody does wish to ask a question, please do raise your hand. You can do that by clicking on the reactions tab on the margins of the screen. So if anyone does have a question, please do put your hand up, and we will of course ask you. It's your virtual hands. Don't sit there doing that, because I can only see 4 people on my screen, so that won't be any good at all. So if you do wish to ask a question, hit that tab. There is also the meeting chat. So if anyone does have a question, then please do pop it in there, and we will see what we can do. Otherwise, we'll just sit here and play Pictionary for half an hour potentially. We do have a question from Keith. So Sarah is dealing with all the technical bits. So Sarah, if you could possibly unmute Keith, please, and then Keith, if you could say who your question's for, and we will do our best to answer it for you.
Thank you very much indeed. I must say I'm most inspired by what's been said so far by our people in charge. My whole point is this: whilst the 100 is on in August, I feel that the county championship should continue. What is necessary is to level up the teams that suffer the most by players going to the 100. This could quite easily be done by taking the full first team squad of the county at the start of the season, subtracting the number of players that go off to play for the 100. So it would vary from county to county. And then the clubs that are affected the most would receive bonus points in some calculation yet to be decided. I've been working on that and haven't come up with a satisfactory solution. But my whole point is this: we want county championship. We want all of our players coming up from the second 11 and academy to be able to play against better players, better opposition. So it means that if we are playing basically a second 11 team for ourselves against a county that have a majority of first team players in it, we would get bonus points irrespective of whether we win, lose or draw. I think this would then give all of those up and coming players an opportunity of playing real proper championship cricket. That's what I would like to say. Thank you. And I just wondered how this could possibly work out in Taunton.
Michael, would you like to respond to levelling up?
Yes. Well, look, first of all, Keith, thank you very much for a very imaginative thought, which had not crossed my mind. But that's a compliment to you, an insult to myself. I just hadn't thought about that. We are, Gordon and I are testing with the powers that be, other counties, ECB, other alternatives to what was, the detail that was proposed in the Strauss review. The one thing I mean, whether we could make what you say work, I'm not sure, but I definitely want to reflect on it. We lost 9 players to the 100 who wanted to go to the 100, and then another 7 were injured. That's how Gordon got to his total, or another 8 injured. So the players go to the 100 not actually because they particularly like the franchises, but because they earn significant amounts of money. And I think I don't know if they would say it as bluntly as that, but I think they probably would. And somebody like Tom Abel, who this year was injured and last year was injured for the 100, would like to generate that income for himself, but he'd hate not to be around in Somerset when we had a county championship match, because he's our club captain and he's a star both on and off the field. So I just want to reflect on that. But where I completely agree is that we need county championship games in high summer, between mid-June and the end of the first week in September. We need significant county championship cricket that would answer the point Gordon made about 4 days out of 43 only having cricket. It's ridiculous that there's no county championship cricket during the summer holidays that people can go and watch. And we need, as far as possible, to get our England players back. I was very frustrated when we were told Jack Leach couldn't play when we were away at Lancashire in the end of July because he was being rested for a test match. It wasn't even going to be a test match for another 2 whole weeks. And I think a left arm spinner should be bowling on hard pitches at Southport or wherever. And that's better preparation for a test match than resting. But that was just my view. So if we can have the top players available, if we can have some county championship games in high summer, that would take me most of the way there. Your idea about points for players and who's gone to 100 and all that, I will think about it and I'll test it out with some other counties and other people. When I've tried anything remotely complicated, they say that's too complicated. But we could try. And Gordon, you've got more experience of that than I have.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a really good, interesting point Keith makes. And I would add that something else that someone said is, couldn't you just cap the number of players each county could lose during the 100? And I can understand why they want that to be the case, but it's not practical. Because for 2 reasons is you'd have quite a lot of legal challenge about restraint of trade is the first thing you'd have. And the players' union would probably have a very strong view on that. Well, not probably, they would have a strong view on that. And the other thing that would happen is those players who we say it was a maximum of 6, the 3 or 4 that we had that could play, the first thing they'd do is knock on our door and say, I want to leave and go and play for a county who doesn't have as many players in the 100. So you kind of, that kills us as well. So it is complicated, but I think it's really worth reflecting.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. We have had a question come through on the chat, but Mr. Shepherd, you had your hand up first. So Sarah, if you could allow Mr. Shepherd to speak, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Gordon. Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking the question, Spence. You've talked a lot about Somerset being at the top table of English cricket on a number of occasions. I just wondered if you had any sort of metrics or identifiers for that. Does it mean being in Division 1 of the Championship? Does it mean hosting a certain number of international fixtures? Is it being in the top 3 or 4 in terms of revenue? How do you kind of sort of quantify that and know when we are at that top table?
It's a very good question. I mean, first of all, I think it does mean. I was very relieved, to be honest, when we beat Northampton from staying in the First Division, because I think that is one key indicator, particularly if there might be a new divisional structure in 2024. So that was really important to me. But I think we could put metrics on it, but I think it means competing for the big prizes, whether it's the T20 Blast or the Royal London Cup or above all the County Championship. To me, the dream, and I'm sure it's a dream for many Somerset fans, is that we'd win the County Championship, ideally before we become 150 in 2025. So I think it means being able to compete for the top prizes and being in the game for the possibility of that. And if you get the financial stuff wrong, as the rugby clubs we mentioned, you suddenly find yourself cut off from that top table. So running the club effectively, as Gordon was saying, enables us to serve our purpose. But it also means being able to recruit players both from overseas and in this country. And I'm glad to say that we've got Cola Cadmore coming from Yorkshire, and we've got Dixon coming from Durham. So at the moment, we're still able to recruit players. And the reason they give for coming to Somerset is Somerset's got a great club atmosphere. The squad is very together. Andy Hurry, who manages the squad, does a really good job. So we've got a very good reputation among players. They don't get that. If you go to Surrey, you might get paid more, but if you come here, you get that atmosphere. We shouldn't trade on that, and we will need to increase player wages. But I mean that we're winning matches regularly, that we're competing for the top prizes and sometimes winning them. That would be I know there are rough metrics.
Thank you very much indeed. Hopefully that answers your question, Ian. Tracy has a question. Sarah will unmute you directly, as they say, and once she's done that, which she has now, please feel free to fire away.
Thank you, Spencer, and hi everyone. I don't really properly understand this, but as I get it, we've now got this 100 competition, which apparently is non-negotiable. And I think what you just said, Michael, is if we can't play the championship in August, because there's someone like Tom Abel, but I guess we could put any cricketer in there. You used his name, I'll use his name.
Yes, yeah.
Play with the 100. Play the 100. It's unfair. They'll miss out because they really want to play the county championship, blah, blah, blah. Well, I would say you can't have your cake and eat it. If, to some of the players, it's if the ECB have deemed that we are going to have this 100, and I mean, I don't get why, but anyway, or, who else does it? Well, blah, blah. But so now we've got to stick with it. So, the players might have to make a choice. Do I want to play county championship in August, or do I want to play for the 100? We have to make those choices every day as normal human beings, don't we? Do we go out for dinner start? Do we pay the gas bill?
Yeah. I take that one.
Yeah, go for
it. In that, Tracy, I think you make a great point. I think a very definitive moment was last year around the Old Trafford Test when India flew home. And the reality is they flew home because they needed to participate in IPL. And that was the first time that players had been asked to choose between what their heart wanted to do and what their bank balance wanted to do. And they went and they chose their bank balance. And I fear, unless we try and accommodate, and I'll come back to the 100 in a second, because it is the elephant in the room, and someone's come up on the screen, is we have said before, we can't have this discussion without talking about the 100. The reality is that the choice that the game has with the 100 is they have really one broadcaster in the game now. If anything happened to Sky, that would have a catastrophic effect on the entire cricket industry from the very top to the very bottom. It would be catastrophic because there isn't another broadcaster at the moment who's prepared to invest 210 million a year or anything like that. If we lost Sky, it would go down by more than half. Sky are very, very keen on the 100. I think that's very, very well known. And the decision that Richard Thompson, the new chair, has to make is to what extent do I challenge the 100 and the broadcast contract that's been signed? Because if I do, that could put the entire game at risk, which is not a good idea. So I think whilst it is a hard pill to swallow, the practicality is that the 100 will be here till 2028. And in the short term, we can fight that. But I think we're wasting an awful lot of energy, and the energy is better to be devoted to trying to come up with a solution that allows county cricket to be strong and the 100 to exist. And I know that's a very hard thing for people to hear, but when you're sitting where we're sitting, there isn't really too much of an option to that.
Yeah, can I just build on that, Gordon? And Keith has commented in the chat as well. I want to say three things about the 100. One is, I'm just going to pat myself on the back here. At the last ECB meeting with first class county chairs, I moved a very, very small technical amendment that shifted the 100 into the same box from a schedule point of view as all the other tournaments. So it would be seen in the round rather than just, until now it's been decided they do what they're going to do for the 100 and then everybody has to fit around it. That got support and was carried. So I think it does need to be seen in the round. We can't see that. We can't have the 100 separated out. The second thing is, which is pure speculation, is what is going to happen beyond 2028. We've got a T20 Blast, we've got a 100 competition. My guess is that within 10 years and maybe sooner, England will only be able to carry one major 20 over competition as T20 competitions globalize. I don't know that. I'm just speculating. And whether it's the 100 or the T20 Blast or some merger or some combination or some two division, I have no idea how it'll work out. But to me, being actively engaged in the 100 for that long term could be quite important. And thirdly, that I'm going to raise something I know is controversial and was raised in one of the questions that was submitted in advance. Should we just stand aside from the 100, or should we look at a Southwest franchise? As Gordon mentioned, there are 3.6 million people, and they're in the Southwest. It's the biggest region without anything close to 100 franchises. You've got to go to Southampton or Cardiff, which you're not going to do from Exeter, never mind Plymouth or Truro, or even Taunton necessarily. So we're without a franchise. If at some point there's going to be some strategic realignment of 20 over competition, or I know the 100 just under 20 overs, but that kind of competition, would we want a franchise? You can see the benefits, as Keith is mentioning in the chat. You can also think we have 9 players go to the 100 elsewhere, so they want to play in the 100, exactly as the Indian cricketers wanted to go home when Gordon mentioned. If they could play for a Southwest franchise, I have a feeling, not necessarily all 9, but most of those would want to play here. And that would inspire them, that would attach them to Somerset for the county championship, for the other competitions. So I think I'm speculating here. I don't know whether any of that is possible, but I think we collectively as the Somerset family should be thinking about how we respond to those strategic challenges and maintaining our ability to recruit and retain and inspire the best players. And I'm pretty sure a good half of the ones who went to the front to the 100 would have had a better time and would have felt more passionate about playing it if they'd been with a Southwest franchise than they were with Birmingham or the Oval Invincibles or whoever they went to.
I'm conscious that we've got 15 minutes left, so I think we can sort of take as read at this point that we've tackled the H word, if you like. We do have a few more questions. Let's see if we can rattle through those before we finish. Well, let's go to Chris with no surname. Chris, there. Hopefully, Sarah will unmute you very soon. There you are, Chris. If you could give us your question, please.
It's like a question for either Michael or Gordon. Is the ECB capable of competing with the IPL?
Michael, I'll take that one. I mean, really simple. Financially, not a pro. because financially they're just so much bigger. And you've got IPL now, which is easily the biggest governing body, the biggest, most affluent governing body in cricket in the world, bigger than any national governing body. And as Michael said, it's even bigger than the Premier League in this country, in football. It's huge. It's vast. So financially it can't compete, but we think that cricket in this country has some unique features, not least because of the time of year it's played, but also its history and its tradition are envied by the rest of the world. And they're things that we can leverage, to use that corporate word, but we can leverage for the good of the game in this country. But we're never going to be Manchester City, but we might well be an Arsenal sort of competing competitively at the top table, both as England and then as Somerset further down the food chain.
Yeah, no, just to add, I think Richard Thompson's appointment is good. I mean, he is a class act, so he will be a good advocate for English cricket in the world governing bodies, and I think that's important, and that will be a big step up from what we've had. Well, obviously there've been an interregnum, but even Richard's predecessors, immediate predecessors, weren't in the same league that he is in, and so I think he'll be good at that, and he knows the broadcasting world. Crucially, though, Chris, who he appoints as his chief executive is going to be fundamental, and I know that they're in the process of looking at a shortlist for that. But that appointment will be fundamental because we can't compete financially, but we can compete with the quality of the arguments we make and our ability to influence the other members of the ICC, small and large.
Can I just come back on it, if possible? Do you think there could be a breakaway within England and Wales if the counties that perhaps have the Test match 100 don't get the financial rewards they require?
Michael, do you want me to say that?
Yeah, well, I know you know more about it than me, but yes, you take it.
Look, I speak to my chief executive colleagues across the other 17 every fortnight, and I also have sort of lots of corridor conversations with them. There is nobody who is advocating less counties to compete and a breakaway of any type. Nobody's advocating that. So I don't see that as coming. I think that there is a debate to be had about the financial model and where that money goes, because if you don't have enough money going to counties who have the capability of delivering value for cricket, and what I mean by that, number of people that play the game, number of umpires you have, the number of pitches, the number of clubs, the number of women's teams, cricket currency. If you don't get money to the front line in the economic world we're walking into of those clubs, what you'll end up with is clubs who are delivering now not being able to because they won't have the money, and the clubs that can't deliver much now anyway still won't be able to, and that's a pretty bad combination. So I think there's more likely to be a financial conversation about the criteria for counties getting compensated and rewarded for what they do for the game, and what's the consequences of that, Chris? I don't know, but I think that will be a necessary conversation.
I think just to reinforce that, I think they may not use the words breakaway, but I think there are some people around cricket who think that the way this all evolves will end up with 7 or 8 cricket clubs with Test match grounds and 100 franchises, and they wouldn't mind if other clubs went to the wall. And in that context, Somerset is rather annoying because we're rather good at providing England players. We've got a good big membership. We've got a good club. It's well run. Our team is, and long may it remain so, it's been competing in the first division for longer than anybody else without a break. And we don't have a Test match ground, and we don't have a 100 franchise, and we proved that you can be at the top table in spite of not having those things. So I think there are some people that think maybe a breakaway would happen by default, and we're going to prove them wrong.
Okay. Conscious again that we've got about 10 minutes left. So if we take these, hopefully we can take these 4 questions. So those of you who have got your hands up, if we could be fairly succinct, if that would be okay. So the next question will be coming from Paul Baker. Sarah will magically make your voice start working any moment now. Paul, if you'd like to fire away.
Thank you, Spencer. Firstly, can I say in response to Gordon's comments on ensuring sustainability of income across the county game. That's absolutely crucial, particularly if we end up with fewer matches, because that will mean less in membership fees, less in gate receipts, less in advertising, and so on and so forth. But I wanted to focus in on a particular issue in relation to the championship, not surprisingly. And it's this, it was a question I submitted, but it hasn't been covered. Under the current proposal for the championship in the review, the best principle, in my view, could quickly denude any team not in the top 6 of its best players.
Yeah.
And the second tier will be of a standard not far above the current Royal London One Day Cup, because the best players will be in the top 6 teams. And there's a figure that needs thinking about here, or a calculation. Under the current proposal, with only one of 12 second-tier teams being promoted each year, at least one team, and probably more, will have to remain in the second tier for a minimum of 11 successive years. Now, that would pretty well condemn those teams to being second-class counties. They would have the less good players, they wouldn't be able to get the good players, and they would really struggle to get to the top. So I wondered what your view is on the situation. I realise this goes to the heart of the best v best principle of the review. What your view is on having a small elite minimal relegation top tier with all those implications. And just one final point, I would just remind people that had the proposed structure for the championship come in next year and been based on this year's results, Somerset would now be in the second tier of counties. Thank you.
Yeah, let me go first, Paul, and then hand to Gordon. First of all, I think there is a real risk if you of exactly what you say. So I think that's analytically a very good point. And when I talk, as I've done recently with Andy Hurry and Vic Marks, who's our cricket director on the board, but also very occasionally with the players only at their invitation, I stress the importance of striving to be in the top 4 next year, because I think that that we don't know what decisions are going to be made next year, but we need to be certainly in the top 6, and really need to competing with that and focus on that in a very driven way for next year, because whatever decisions are made, they will be there'll be a big setback for the teams that get in the 3rd division or get in the 2 conferences. If that, I don't think that will fly, but we'll see, and get kind of stuck there. And you can see what that looks like if you look at Leicestershire, who didn't win a single game, or maybe they won one right at the end, but and they've got membership that's tiny, and they depend almost entirely on ECB handouts. And we absolutely, as Somerset, if we're going to be at the top table, we have to avoid that. So arguing for the nature of promotion and relegation is an important thing. Oddly, there are some people who think that the way to get the best through the rest is to have limited relegation, so the top teams do become the elite. The elite, a bit like that short-lived European Super League that was proposed and then died in football a year or so ago. I personally think that's wrong. I think you want, if you're going to have promotion and relegation, it should be open, and there should be a real possibility of movement up or down according to how well you play and how well your club is run. But I do, Gordon, you're probably
yeah, no, and I think I think Paul raises a good point, and there is no question that is a risk. And I would point out that we already have 3 or 4 counties that don't move out of the lower half of the 2nd division, and haven't done for a decade. So you've already got what you've highlighted in a form already. But I recognise the risk of what you're saying, without doubt. But need to be aware that it was fluid if that was what ended up being taken forward.
Thank you, gentlemen. we have committed to going through these last three questions. So if Chris, Alan, and Anthony, as I said, if we could be fairly succinct, that would be fantastic. Chris, if you would like to give us your question, please.
Sure. Luckily, my main point was just asked by Paul, because I think the risk of establishing a sort of elite that lives at test venues and scoops up the best players is the biggest existential threat. Let me ask something else very quickly then. We haven't talked about the Royal London Cup. I'd be interested in any thoughts you had on the proposal that it move to the start of the season and become more of a knockout.
Yeah, I'll say that. I think that, Chris, there are a couple of ways of looking at that. I think purely from a commercial perspective, that's not good news. I think that's one thing. Having England players available for it, which is what was suggested, would be a positive thing. So I think that there are pros and cons on that. And then there's the debate about, do you need a stronger one-day competition because we won the World Cup in 19 and so on. And then the debate goes on to, is it a one-day game now, or is it 2.5 times a T20? The way they play one-day cricket now is just like it's a T20 game extended. So I think there are pros and cons to that argument. But again, and I noticed someone came up and said lots of waffle here, but the point that we're making is we don't think it's right to take a polarized position on one particular competition without looking at the impact on everything. And because if you do take the polarized decision, which is an increasingly popular way of doing things in the modern world, you'll end up making the wrong calls for the overall game. And we feel quite strongly about that.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions going in the chat. I'm not typing fast enough to get through them all by 8 o'clock, but we will look at them afterwards. So I've only replied to a few, but that's not because they're not all important.
I think hopefully everyone can understand that we do have limited time here. If we could answer every single question, then obviously we could. We're trying to do as many as we can. As you see, Michael is answering some of the questions in the chat. Alan, if we could have your question, please, when Sarah's unmuted you. Thank you very much. I'm sure she's working out. There you go.
Okay. Thanks very much for hosting this, Gordon and Michael. My point really is very simple. It's quite obvious that the problem here is the 100 that gets in the way of everything else. And there are so many of the points that you've mentioned and so many of the things I've read carefully, the Strauss document, and a lot of the problems that he raises, I think, would be solved by removing the 100 from the programme completely. I don't necessarily accept Gordon's point that Sky are the only players in the room. BT are broadcasting cricket at the moment and are very keen, I think, to have more sport. They're going into lots of other things than the things that they started out with. I think my question really is what commitment Somerset has to try and get the 100 removed, whether it's in 2028 or before, because it's quite obvious that the championship suffers as a result. The test team suffers. I mean, we had the ridiculous situation where we didn't have the option of bringing in alternative test match openers when the two, Rory Burns and I can't remember who was opening with him, were failing completely because there was no one playing red ball cricket to bring in. That Sky surely would be, I mean, they are big investors in cricket, and if they were able to understand that they are effectively, through the 100, destroying the county championship, the counties, and the test match team, I'm sure they would be open to some sort of persuasion. And if they weren't, then somebody else would step in, I'm sure, to put the money up, whether it's a combination of BT, Talk TV, whoever else. But we can't go on with the situation as it is, and I just want to know what Somerset's commitment is to removing it.
Could I take the BT question, Michael, and then maybe you pick up on the commitment to remove it? I'm quite sure we'd find a broadcaster to do it. They wouldn't pay anything like Sky. BT are no longer in the market for primary sports rights. They made that decision 3 or 4 years ago to pull out of going for primary sports rights, which effectively means they pick up what others don't pick up. So if you look at what they do with football, they take what's left. And that's their strategy now. And that's a BT global strategy towards how they run their television operation. So that market has changed quite considerably. The potential for another player, Alan, is much more within the likes of Netflix, Meta, and other. There's an organization, Amazon, who are new players in the market. That's where potentially the next broadcast for Sky challenge comes from. But there's no evidence yet that they're in the game for domestic sports rights. The only one of those who have bought rights on a national level are Amazon, who bought Premier League football in December only to cross-sell for the Christmas market on Amazon Prime. So there's nobody else in the game at the level that Sky are at, or anything else, or anything like it. Michael.
What was the second part of the question? Just remind me. I was following the broadcast.
Alan was asking, to what extent are we committed to getting rid of the 100?
I think we're not committed to getting rid of it at this point. We're committed to ensuring it gets reviewed, ensuring it gets thought about alongside all the other tournaments, and ensuring that at some point in the future there is a much more coherent approach to short forms of the white ball game, whether it, as I was speculating, there might be a merger of some kind between the T20 Plus and the 100. But if the 100 is going to be there for whatever we in Somerset do through to 2028, it's in a signed up contract, and we'll see it. So I wouldn't want us to commit against it. And if we read the runes, we have to think about how we would influence it. And that's where, I mean, I've seen Alan's comment in the chat. That's where the possibility of a Southwest franchise is, in my view, worth considering. But I wouldn't want anybody to think that I'm sitting here thinking that's the main thing that's going to change the game. I want us to have a sustainable financial future. I want us to be able to win the county championship. I want us to get into the top division after 2023, whatever that looks like. And if I had a single priority, that would be it. But we have to deal with 100, and it may be better to be in it than not in it.
And could I put that in context as well? Because I think that I guess the 100 is the controversial thing. Do the Southwest want to have involvement in it in the way Michael has suggested that we should consider? The reason behind that isn't to be involved in it for money. The reason to be involved, to be considerate, is where does the school kid in Truro go and watch cricket in August? And if it's there, and that is the vehicle, then we believe that we would have an obligation to the game in the Southwest to make sure that kids get the opportunity to be inspired to deliver our purpose. That's it. It's not because we desperately want to be in the 100 or we're desperately for the 100.
And the other thing is our best players are going to want to be in the 100. And so the question then is, where are they going in the 100? And if we had county, we were talking about earlier in this conversation, if we had county championship in August, the players who get in the 100, almost certainly driven by the financial incentives, would go to the 100. That is the reality, and that they're young men and they're brilliant at what they do, and they want to make serious money. And who can begrudge them that? So if we gave them a choice, you could either stay at Somerset and play county championship cricket, or go to the 100. They go to other counties, most of them.
I see that Anthony Verrier, he had his hand up for a long time with a question, and Alan's put his hand back up, but I'm sort of conscious of the fact that we have heard from Alan, and there's a few more questions to get through potentially, and we are out of time. Anthony appears to have dropped off. So apologies for that. I'm aware that we are slightly over time now, gentlemen. Are you happy to end things there, end procedures there? We will save the chat. We will save the chat function before we end the call, so that we will be able to go back and have a look at those calls. Do you have any closing sentiments, gentlemen?
I'll just have. I'll let Gordon close. But I just want to say thank you very much to everybody for their constructive engagement with the debate and for understanding the reality and the challenges. And there's a lot of interesting thoughts coming through on the chat and have come through in the questions. And I've very much enjoyed the engagement, including in places the vigorous debate. And I look forward to continuing this series in the future. Gordon, over to you.
Yeah, no. Thank you. I think what I would just like to say is firstly, those people who have asked questions, Spencer, that we haven't managed to answer, I think we should take the record of them and then email out the answers potentially perhaps in a newsletter I do later in the month. The other point is I think that we need to have this as an ongoing discussion and to have regular forums over the winter virtually, so more people can access them. And everybody should be absolutely be assured that when we have final proposals, which we still don't have, that we will engage and share with them and share the perspective of the club and listen to the views of people on this call and beyond. And that's the way we'll go about our business.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I can confirm I've just been speaking with Sarah. She is going to save the chat element of this so that we can respond to those questions that have come in on the chat function in an appropriate fashion. I guess that just leaves us to thank Sir Michael and Gordon for joining us tonight, for Sarah, Todd, and Freddie for helping behind the scenes, and of course, most importantly, to thank you, the members, for joining us, because obviously your concerns are our concerns. The future of and prosperity of Somerset County Cricket Club is the thing that we all have in common. We want to see the club flourishing, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. So as always, you are valued members. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and Michael, Sir Michael and Gordon, thank you too for your time. We will see you hopefully on another of these shortly. Thank you very much indeed.
Very much. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.